Good morning. Okay, good morning, everybody. We have still a few stragglers, but we'll go ahead and get started. My watch has 12 minutes after 10. We've got a long agenda today, but hopefully this is going to be very interesting. I'm really pleased at the opportunity for us to be able to showcase just a very few of our success stories and the contributions that all of our universities make to economic development and commercialization of their discoveries and innovations that are so key to our knowledge economy, and that we're going to have to really focus differently as we move ahead in Florida to develop an economy that is sustainable based on today's needs. So today we've had the opportunity, some of the things that are on your agenda have been either eliminated or moved around because of the legislative session. So for example, while we were expecting John Adams from Enterprise Florida to come speak to us, he has been called to sit through a long committee meeting today, so he's not going to be there. But we have plenty of other things. We're not going to have any legislators come today because they're tied up. This is the last week for policy committees to be meeting, so it's a difficult time for anybody to get away. But hopefully, word of what goes on in our schools and the program that we're going to put on today will get back to all of those people that we need, that we want to hear about it. But we've been very fortunate this year. Several of the committees in the legislature have recognized the importance of the university system in contributing to our economy, and there have been several short presentations before committees that showcased a little bit of what we're talking about today. But not only does our university system produce the graduates, some 68,000 of them every year, to fill the jobs that are necessary to keep this economy going, but it develops and brings to the state the jobs that support the research that they do. So as I've told you, when I became chair, as everybody has heard repeatedly, and I sound like a broken record, I went to all of the schools, and as I did that, I was able to just kind of stumble upon very exciting research that's going on that people don't hear anything about. And it's very exciting, and although today we're not going to hear all of that, we're going to hear some of the success stories that we can talk about. And there are any number of high-profile activities that we've heard about in the past, such as the Mag Lab at FSU, which is a phenomenal attribute for them to have, and it brings over 1,000 scientists a year to test out their research, and they're from all over the world. And we've heard from the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition in Pensacola, which is part of the university system, and many of the economic development investments that the state has made, Scripps, SRI, Max Planck, Torrey Pines, Burnham, and others. And we will spend some time on those in the future. But those are some examples that we've all heard about. The things we're going to talk about today are things that we don't always hear about, but are success stories and are just key examples of what goes on. So as we move through the session, I know that we're all going to learn something, and I hope that everybody, the presidents and the board members, will make this an interactive morning, because I think what we want to do is to have discussion about what we're hearing. We are going to have I do want to do one thing before I have Ari introduce the economic development portion of the session. The last thing that was on the agenda for this morning was the professional science master's degree program and the governor's proclamation. And I'd like to go ahead and take that up because there's so many people in the audience who have come to be part of that. And so I would ask Ari, Dr. Lamont, to please give us an overview there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, a few weeks ago, the State University System deans of the graduate schools came together in a teleconference and talked about, as a system, exploring putting in place across the state a new degree called the Professional Science Masters, which is getting a lot of play and interest across the country at the many respectable institutions. This is as opposed to a research-focused degree, it is more applied. It is much more a degree that is built with industry input, and it's in specific areas that can accommodate that kind of entrepreneurship and collaboration. When we explored it, we knew that the deans would get together. They're getting together on March 30th to work with the Sloan Foundation here in Tallahassee to further explore and try to put that degree in place, and which time they would be using some pieces that would be movable across the system. In conjunction with that, we queried the governor's office, and that resulted in the proclamation that Chair McDevitt now has. Well,
I think that work over the next few months is going to be very interesting and is a wonderful way to tee up the governor's proclamation declaring that March 30th through April 3rd is Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week, and we have here to be recognized a lot of graduate students as well as the Dean of FAMU's graduate students, and I'm sure there may be others in the audience. But Governor Christ has issued the following proclamation: whereas a graduate and professional education attracts students from across the nation and across the world to Florida universities for advanced and specialized training, and whereas in graduate and professional programs across the state, graduate school educators are providing access to cutting-edge knowledge and analytical skills essential to ensuring that Florida produces individuals at the forefront of their respective fields, and whereas graduate and professional students make vital contributions to the teaching and research that underpins the new knowledge-based economy as graduate teaching and research assistants, and whereas Florida teachers with advanced degrees are creating environments that will assist Florida's children and young adults to become productive members of the workforce and informed citizens, and whereas alumni from Florida's graduate and professional schools occupy leadership roles in school systems, institutions of higher learning, health-related institutions, businesses, government, and politics. Now, therefore, I, Charlie Crist, Governor of the State of Florida, do hereby extend greetings and best wishes to all observing March 30th, 2009 through April 3rd, 2009 as Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week. And it's signed by the Governor, and this board has adopted a similar resolution which reads, whereas the graduate and professional education is critical to developing a competent and talented workforce for the state of Florida by attracting gifted students to Florida and by providing graduate education to the best and brightest Florida students, and whereas graduate and professional programs offered in the state university system add value to the undergraduate experience by engaging undergraduate students in the research programs of professors and their graduate students and introducing undergraduates to the potential for graduate education, and whereas outstanding graduate and professional programs in the state university system enhance the reputation of the institutions and bring an additional $1.2 billion of external funding to Florida, and whereas graduate and professional programs also bring talented faculty and students to the university communities where they live and work, and whereas the alumni of graduate and professional programs in the state university system become the leaders of the state in business, in medicine, in education, in law, in government, and in politics, to lead the state in navigating successfully through the 21st century knowledge economy. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Board of Governors meeting on the campus of Tallahassee Community College in Tallahassee this 25th day of March 2009 do hereby commend graduate and professional students in the state university system, and be it further resolved that the members of the Board of the State University System, Board of Governors of the State University System join Governor Christ in proclaiming March 30th, 2009 through April 3, 2009 as Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week. And we have in the audience a lot of graduate students who are here to commemorate this designation, and I'd like for them all to stand, including our own Rebecca Brower, who is an FSU graduate student. So, congratulations. And it's very fitting that we have this today. And here is FAMU's Dean. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, on behalf of Florida A&M University and Dr. James Ammon, and on behalf of all of the graduate deans in the state university system, I thank you all so much for acknowledging the significant role that graduate students and professional students play in the economic development of the state of Florida.
Thank you all very much. Very fitting that we should do this in connection with this program, because that is where the basis and start of our economic development mission really begins. Although some of it starts in undergraduate school, the bulk of it does start in these graduate programs. Dr. Marshall.
Madam Chair, I have a question for RE. I received a notice several weeks ago, I think, from you, RE, saying we're describing the meeting on the 30th with the Sloan people.
Yes, sir.
Are governors expected to attend and participate in that meeting?
We would certainly welcome any governors who would come to the meeting. The graduate deans were excited by the prospect of some of the governors being at the meeting, yes. You're certainly welcome.
Any other questions? If not, thank you all very much. We'll move now into the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is Dr. Lamont providing us with an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I intend to be quite brief. I have just a few slides and three key points that I would like to leave you with, and I will reinforce them at the end of my presentation. But I'd like to begin just by mentioning that yesterday evening, if you listen to President Obama, you would know that he spoke about not cutting short investing in those things that would give us long-term growth. And that's really what we're talking about today with research and economic development in the state university system. And we're talking about the criticality of the state university system's role in changing the culture of Florida to a knowledge-based, innovative 21st century economy. When we do that, it means, with all due respect to what we call the Big Three, that we're going to have a reduced reliance on the Big Three. That means a reduced reliance on traditional agriculture as we know it. It means a reduced reliance on a cornucopia of housing and real estate as we know it. That in the background is the St. Johns River, President Delaney. I wanted to work that in for you. And these are all shots of Florida, by the way. And finally, it means a reduced reliance on tourism as we currently know it, or knew it. Rather, it's going to mean that we turn the corner and we start moving into things like alternate energies, ethanol from forestry refuse and from sugarcane bagasse, which currently the University of Florida is probably a world leader. It's going to mean nanocircuitry, how many circuits can dance on the head of a pin. It's going to mean cancer cures, healthcare practices that are cutting edge, and drug discoveries all the way around the system. It's going to mean composite materials, Bucky paper. It's going to mean the bricks, the mortar, the aluminum, and the adobe of the 21st century. It's going to mean aerospace, but even here, this is an antiquated slide because we know that the shuttle will be retired next year, and rather we will have to be looking at the next generation of aerospace. And finally, and most importantly, it's going to mean in hundreds of ways the movement from the laboratory and ideas on the left to the products, the services, and the products on the right through a university commercialization process and the negotiation in the middle of that very dangerous place that is generally known as the Valley of Death, where good ideas don't get it to the living room. Now, let's talk just quite briefly about the legislature's investment to date strictly on this kind of infrastructure for the state university system. First of all, you'll be aware, I'm holding this up in my hand so you can see, in January, you approved an annual report for the Centers of Excellence, the 21st Century programs. I'm going to put those 3 programs up on this slide. This is probably the most chock full of information on return on investment of any document that we've yet produced. The Centers of Excellence, which began in 2002, and of which now we have 11 throughout the system, and on which I'll very briefly focus on a couple of them. We have the World Class Scholars Program, you remember, that brought in or retained 16 world-class scholars in various STEM disciplines, all of whom are still in the state university system. And finally, the Commercialization Assistance Grant Program, of particular interest to the universities as they commercialize, as they move through the Valley of Death, and as they work with Gary Keller, one of our future speakers at the Institute for Commercialization. These programs, in the whole, the legislature has put $170 million. That is a great start for Florida. That's a lot of money and a great start. However, I would point out, could point out, that in other states, in Ohio, in Texas, and elsewhere, that number is much larger than it is for us. Let's look at one and drill down just quickly on one Center of Excellence. Could do it on all 11. But the Center of Excellence of Photonics at the University of Central Florida, created by Dr. Swallow, who is here. With a $10 million initial investment, you see a $37 million return on the investment with 145 awards in research and development, 112 publications, and 6 new companies formed. That is a great investment on those dollars, we think. In another example, this is kind of the way it works here and there when you set up Centers of Excellence. Just a couple of weeks ago, on March 13th, Congressman Ron Klein joined scientific researchers to announce a $1.1 million investment from the federal government on FAU's Center for Ocean Energy Technology, which is exploring the Gulf Stream as an energy source. So when you set up Centers of Excellence, they attract funding in this manner, and certainly as we look at the stimulus package that is coming from the federal government, we're very keen on the centers doing well there. Let's take a look at sponsored research nationally, just to give you a picture of what happens quickly in the United States. Research expenditures are roughly $40 billion across the country, with a combination of invention disclosures, patent applications, patents filed, new licenses, options at 37,429. 628 companies were formed last year, or I'm sorry, in 2005. 2/3 of those companies are small companies, 20 people or fewer, back to that commercialization process. and 527 new products to market. Let's take a look at the state university system as a whole. These are key numbers that you'll want to keep in mind. We have a one-page front and back for you that will do so. The total awards we received, $1.4 billion. The total external awards, $1.2 billion. That's all money coming into Florida that wouldn't have come in otherwise, coming in due to the state university system research machine. 11,800 proposals submitted, active projects at any given time. Right now we have 16,725 with new patent applications 762 and patents issued 153. Let's take a look at the disciplines associated with those dollars. I'm sorry if you can't see it. I will try to read this out for you if you have a hard time looking at it. But the big blue there that you see is the discipline of health. Now, that's the medical education programs, the med schools, anything associated with allied health, health-related, as you would expect. The purple is engineering. Moving clockwise around the wheel, you see physical sciences, education, 8%. And then you see biology and biomedical at 6%, and then agriculture at 6% also. That is largely IFAS and Florida A&M University's School of Agriculture. And I should mention that IFAS is where the ethanol program happens at the University of Florida, largely. So IFAS, when I talk about moving away from traditional agriculture as a mainstay, this is what I mean, is that IFAS is making its move into a new kind of cultural footprint away from what it was doing 15 or 20 years ago. If we look at the agencies from which we get the money, it's interesting also. You will see the big blue, again, is the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Then the purple, the National Science Foundation, the NSF grants. The yellow is the Department of Defense. We don't have that by discipline, you see, obviously, on the wheel before. But here's the DOD coming in. We get a lot of money from the Department of Defense. Education, again, is red. And again, the United States Department of Agriculture at 4%. The 12% is other. Let me ask you to focus at the very bottom of this slide, if you will, on my source, because there are so many different sources. This source is the National Association of State Universities and Land Grant Colleges, also known as NASALGIC. NASALGIC is the best body nationally, probably, to get information on what's happening in the universities and so on. You will see different figures on return on investment. We can show you figures. Medical schools will show you different figures. These are national figures, and they're putting together all of the nostalgic schools so that you can see every year the average public university spends $284 million. Now, you may ask the next question, are we average? I would maintain that probably it would be I'd have to do some research to answer that question, but I suspect that because of the size of several of our institutions that we would be not considered average. Every year, the average public university generates $5 for every dollar invested. That's 5 to 1. You will see numbers 10 to 1, 12 to 1, 13 and 14 to 1, depending on discipline and so on, all of which may be accurate. But even here, I would submit to you that a 5 to 1 investment is something I would take in this fiscal climate right now. Every 10 years, the average public university creates an additional 1,000 jobs through startup, and then another 1,200 jobs in business incubators and their research parks that are associated with their institutions. Further, a second kind of investment at $46,000, a U.S. baccalaureate graduate earns on average $20,000 more a year than a United States high school graduate. So the second piece that we're doing, besides bringing in money, is we are graduating students who are cutting edge and moving into the workforce. Last year, in 2008, the SUS produced 68,500 graduates at all levels, not just bachelor's, but at all levels. These are my conclusions, my three statements, members. Number one, the state university system brings $1.2 billion to Florida every year, and that's growing, and it's grown. It's almost doubled in the last 10 years. There's no reason that it won't double or at least grow more. Second point, the SUS provides cutting-edge goods, services, healthcare, and a 21st century culture. These are the things that make it systemic and cultural and long-term. That's why North Carolina has a research triangle. That's why there is a Silicon Valley. That's why the Northeast has a culture of innovation. And finally, we add 68,500 high-skill, high-wage employees to the workforce yearly. Those, members, for me are the three most important conclusions. And that concludes my brief introduction. Madam Chair, I'll be happy to answer questions or let you move the program right along.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Lamont? Governor Martin.
Dr. Lamont, you talked about University of Central Florida and the fact that a $10 million investment is generating 145 new awards, worth about $37 million, 112 publications. What I see missing here is what's the number of jobs that have actually been created as a result of this effort. Can you quantify that for us?
Madam Chair, I cannot do it right here and now, Governor Martin. I would need to go back and tease that out of the report. So I could give you anecdotes, but I think it would be better if I came back with some more quantified information to do a better job to answer.
Would you look at compensation levels also?
I will.
Is there anyone in the audience that knows the answer to this? No. Okay. Because that was my question also. Somebody does?
Well, I can make a comment about it. I don't know the precise answer. I'll get to the precise answer. Two of those 6 spin-off companies I will just give as an example. One's a company called OptiGrade. OptiGrade has about 20 employees. They're selected as one of the top 100 university spin-off companies in the nation 2 years ago. Another company called Radiant. Radiant has raised over $20 million of investment capital. I think their fund level is around 30 or 40 people these days. And I would just know that relying on my bad memory,
I mean, I don't know that this might be kind of a rule of thumb, and you know, there's hundreds of these throughout the system, and trying to get a feel for what kind of job creation we're getting, and whether they're high-paying, mid-level, etc.
The number that I have ingrained in my head is just from our incubator clients in general. We've produced about, we've had in the last 8 years, 100 clients. They've created 1,000 jobs, over 1,000 jobs, average salary over $60,000 a year. And I think Dr. Rene has his presentation to do.
Okay, great. That would be great. Governor Martin, are you going to carry on?
Yes, and just as a closing comment, I think it's very important as we report on these activities that we really begin to factor in the number of jobs created and what the salary ranges are. Everyone now is talking about how many jobs are created, so I think as we begin to communicate our programs, we need to do that. Okay, our first presenter today will be Mr. David Day from the University of Florida. He is the director of the Office of Technology and Licensing. The University of Florida has a national reputation for commercialization and university research. And Mr. Day is going to drill down a little deeper into the workings of one of our universities. Mr. Day. Yes.
Thank you.
That's good and bad that you're behind us.
well, we'll work it out. So thanks for the honor of being here. I've got just a few minutes, and we're pleased to work with you. I was asked to present mostly on the University of Florida, I will say that the tech transfer offices in the state do work cooperatively and collaboratively together. We've been meeting together quarterly for about 10 years, where we talk about our business, and we try to offer advice and assistance to help each other out. We've jointly exhibited at trade shows. We've jointly held trade show conferences, and so your tech transfer offices do collaborate with each other. Numbers, well, my goodness, that looks a little small. So for the University of Florida, we're a big research university. We're about a third of the research in the state of Florida. We're about the third largest research university in the Southeast, behind Duke and UNC, close to UNC in size. And I think not long ago we passed UC Berkeley in terms of the research space. What that means for us or any other university is for about every $2 million in research, an invention is created. A scientist usually doesn't have an aha as the result of a life's work, where they come up with something. And you'll see at our university, we're running about those numbers. We have about 300 inventions a year that our scientists disclose to us, whether we want them to or not. We file patent applications on about half of those, which is fairly typical nationwide. We license or have licenses and options for about 75 a year, which is about 1.5 times the national average. And those 75 deals, if you will, move about 110 to 120 of the patents every year out into somebody else's hands. Of those deals, about a third of those deals go to startup companies. We do about 10 new startup companies every year, plus or minus 10 or 12. And we've been doing these for the 8 years that I've been there, so we've done about 100 in that period of time. And so these companies do represent a continuing source of new business coming back when they're successful and taking more technologies. So about a third of our business is with startup companies. And in terms of the royalties that you might make out this, we've been in the top 10 until recently in the country in royalties made. And you can't run royalties out of this, things like hiring more floor people at Walmart. Royalties and earnings are a combination of how large your university is, how long it's been doing tech transfer, how well it establishes tech transfer, how excellent is the faculty, and luck. And it's an odds game, and the money that's made is usually a big hits deal. You'll have a handful of things that make a lot of money, one or two or three, and a whole lot of them that don't make a lot of money. So if you ask somebody in tech transfer why we're in business, what we're in business for, I would say that you're going to find, generally speaking, a 3 objective hierarchy. And the first one is faculty service, faculty service, faculty service. The faculty bring in over $1 billion worth of research every year. They're the big number, we're the small number. We're there to help the university recruit and retain outstanding faculty. Secondly, we are there to get these inventions to the marketplace and bring back a return to the universities and the taxpayers. And thirdly, we're there to do economic development. And if we do our job well, economic development will happen. You ask about measuring the impact in terms of jobs and salaries. Amongst us tech transfer directors, to our knowledge, for tech transfer, this has only been done once in Florida, and our university did it once in 2003, and when we did it at that point in time, we found out that we had about $500 million worth of economic impact on our inventions and about 2,000 jobs created. None of us are funded to do this. As a group, we'd like to see tech transfer economic development measured here statewide, but we do not have a mechanism or a funding mechanism to get that done just yet. We could do it through FRC, through the Institute. We could do it ourselves. We'd like to do that. So one truism in technology transfer, well, actually the results of a study, is that 80% of technology transfer occurs within 400 miles of your location. And if you look at the businesses that we have to do business with within 400 miles of our locations in Florida, we don't have New England, Boston, or San Francisco. We don't have a lot of big businesses around to do business with. And so we need to be successful at startups and rely to a significant degree on startups who, when they grow, then will do business with the larger companies. For our style, We try not to do scientist-led startups. We try to recruit professional entrepreneurs, CEOs to do it. We have extensive programs to help people be successful. We don't sit in our office and do tech transfer. We do company formation activities. We hustle around, find investors, find CEOs, find service providers, try to help put the package together, and then try to do the license when the company is ready to get going. We've had some success. I said we've started about 100 companies. Last fiscal year, ending June 30, 13 of our companies raised about $100 million in investment capital. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of hiring. That's a lot of acceleration of this science toward being a product at some point in time. The valley of death there also is the capital gap. Between that level of federal and state funding that Re showed you and where businesses, corporations, and venture capitalists pick up the investment, there's an area there where a lot of good technologies die. And it's late-stage applications-oriented research and early-stage company formation activities that there is really not much of a source of funding for. Of that $1.4 billion in research, very, very, very little of it is applications. It all stops at the point where you get a refereed publication, and there's no money to actually do the kind of non-publication stuff that will make a prototype and put it in somebody's hand and buy. And then, Ari did mention the grant, the GAP assistance program. We as tech transfer directors did get a one-time $2 million program year before last that resulted in, I don't know, Jack Sullivan would have the answer, 20, 30 projects all over the state from $15,000 to $250,000 to help form companies. And it was very useful. We wish we could have something like that on a regular basis. So this is our puck piece. We tell people we're really good, and sometimes they believe it. This Week published an article on our startup company creation activities and put us with MIT and Caltech. I just have to do that. Okay, a war story while we're here. And I have no idea how we're doing on time, but I'm about 2/3 of the way through here. Okay. The most successful startup company that's come out of a Florida university yet is Regeneration Technologies in Alachua, which is just north of Gainesville. It now has 750 employees and $150 million a year in product sales. It recently acquired a German company. And while all of that's good, what's been even better, and by the way, we made $70 million off of sale of stock that we plowed back into building a couple of more buildings. The Orthopedics Institute on the left was built almost entirely with that money, and then the money served as a foundation for also the Cancer and Genetics Research Institute on our campus. But what's happened even beyond that is the management who started that company, when it got to be time to spend all of their time in New York with starched white shirts talking to Wall Street, it wasn't fun anymore. They left. This is typical of entrepreneurs. They took some time off. We worked hard to get them back re-engaged again. They started another half dozen companies and 2 investment funds for us. They're raising another entire generation of young management under their tutelage. Entrepreneurism is actually an apprenticeship sport. And so over time, this one company is going to have a ripple far beyond the results of that one company. For any of you who may be available to be in Gainesville on April 14th, or who would want to watch by webcast, we're having our 3rd annual showcase where we're rolling out our 16 newest little baby companies and our 20 newest cutting-edge technologies. The investors out there are right now love everything clean tech. Clean tech being energy, environment, water, air. They also like medical devices and software. You've got a lot of good new medicines and therapeutics rotting on the shelf at the universities in this state, around the country, really. It's the highest price, most risky area, and we really could use some strategic financial help on getting some of these new drugs to the marketplace. They are the highest risk, they are the highest reward. But we do invite you to our showcase, and we also will be doing webcasts on that, and we will have our presentations precisely 12 minutes long. So if you want to tune in for any particular one, they're going to run on time. And we'll have people all over, basically the Western world, not a few hundred, but last year from Singapore to Europe, who tuned in and out looking at specific opportunities. We do have some needs, and I'm not authorized by my university to say anything about that, but I don't usually do that. And so we have incubators in town. We're out of incubation space. We need some more incubation space. UCF does a great job at that. The venture capitalists don't like putting money into bricks and mortar. We appreciate everything you've done to support GAP legislation and to support venture capital legislation. We certainly would love that to continue. And then the one other thing for us, and I think the other universities and Gary at the Institute, we're looking for serial entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, people who've been successful in the technology business and who want to either lend their advice or be involved. If you will find some, you will know some, you will run across them in your lives. If you would please refer them to myself or Gary, we will spread them throughout the system to try to let them help us be successful. And with that, I thank you for your time.
I have a question. You say that you have 10 or 12 spinoffs a year, or startups a year. Are those all within the Gainesville area, or do they expand out beyond?
They're not all within the Gainesville area. About a third of them are in the Gainesville area. About a third of them are elsewhere around Florida, and about a third of them are elsewhere around the United States. We have startups in Boston, San Francisco, Research Triangle, wherever we can find the management.
And where did that? Could you put that 1,000 employees within a context?
These things usually start off with one or two people, and if they're successful, they'll grow to 3 to 5 in a year, and then 10 to 20, and in a few short years, 5 years or so, it's not uncommon to see them get to 200 or 300. But those are the ones who really do well. A lot of them don't. In the next 6 months, the blood's going to run ankle deep in the streets with the small startups that are going to die in this current capital crunch. Be a little alliterative there.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions for David Day? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know we couldn't have everybody come up and give a presentation like that. Everybody has tech transfer officers. Is there anybody that would like to add or say something about their school in kind of a global basis? Because I know, Dr. Hitt, you've had very good success, and we are going to showcase one of your programs here. But is there anybody, Judy, anything you want to say?
I think we're all doing this kind of work, and we all have spin-offs, and we're glad to share it.
But I think what we'd like to do is to try to accumulate, and I liked his idea about having some way to measure economic development. It would be useful, and maybe our next speaker can talk to us a little bit about how we might be able to do that, because it's great to say you have all this, but how many jobs are you creating, and are the jobs in Florida, and yada yada. What do they pay? Yes, ma'am.
One thought, because Dr. Lamont and the group that did all the Center of Excellence work worked through a lot of measures, and we've kind of given that a lot of thought, so it may be a matter of starting there and extrapolating it to the things that weren't centers of excellence, because I think all the universities had an opportunity to participate in what those measures would be. It was job creation, it was research dollars. We've kind of, I think, got that template in the Center of Excellence performance measures that might be.
Well, maybe
we may not
that's
need to do it as extensively, but we could at least do some.
Well, maybe that's a project we can work on jointly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Gary Keller, who is a new person here. He is the director of the Florida Institute for Commercialization of Public Research, which is located on the Florida Atlantic University campus, but it is actually under the overview or oversight of Enterprise Florida. But this was created recently by the legislature, and I think the big promoter was, of course, Senator Jeremy Ring, who is very big on private equity and commercialization and bringing these inventions and innovations to the mainstream. And so I'm happy that we have an opportunity to hear from Mr. Keller and what the Institute does and will do going forward. Mm-hmm.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. And my name is Gary Keller. I'm the director for the Florida Institute for the Commercialization of Public Research. And the Institute was formed from legislation in 2007 that was put forward by Senator Rigg, focused on how to build the next steps in creating value from the research that was occurring. Sorry, is that better? Okay. That was occurring from the research within the public institutions as well as the private institutions, both universities and the private research institutions that had been attracted to the state of Florida. The Institute serves as a one-stop shop, and the focus is to partner these technologies which have the potential to be startup companies with the seasoned management that's critical for their success, as well as to the early stage investment sources that are needed in order to both get these companies off the ground and be able to do that here in the state of Florida rather than have it occur somewhere else. The Institute is comprised of the 11 state universities within the system on the left, as well as the private universities and institutions that receive support from the state of Florida. The state of Florida overall has been very effective at increasing the number of licenses that are occurring to companies for startups. And as well, that has been leading to the accumulation of a number of startup companies within the state of Florida. I began as the director of the Institute in October, so we are newly formed. We have had our board established in the beginning of December. We spent the month of December working to put together a 5-year plan for what we could accomplish and to focus on how to get to those next steps, and are currently compiling the data that will allow us to effectively do that partnering. But one of the things that we have as part of this is accumulating the startup companies that have been established by the state university system and by these other partners. And while that's in the beginning, we'd hope that over time we can build the kind of repository that will allow us to point to the kind of specific impact and metrics that this process of commercialization is making for the state of Florida, both in reference to revenue and jobs, which is clearly something that is an important resource and outcome to be able to address in a ongoing and specific way. The state university system reported $54 million in royalty income in 2007 and $2.7 billion in product sales. Most of this has occurred outside the state. The Institute's focus is really being able to have that kind of economic impact, both in terms of the revenue and the jobs that it creates, occur here in the state. The activities of the Institute currently are gathering the technologies that have the potential to be commercialized into startup companies from our partners, and presenting that information in a way that's easy to be able to take seasoned entrepreneurs that are looking for their next opportunity and begin to have them find that particular technology or technologies that they want to focus on for their next opportunity, as well as make it easy for venture capitalists to come into the state, realize the breadth of opportunities that we have, and be able to get them engaged, as well as being able to take these opportunities and go outside the state and market them to attract these kind of resources that we need to the state for startups that can occur here.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Absolutely.
I just read something in the last couple of weeks, and I heard it too, that we don't have an environment that encourages venture capital to come here. Is that one of the things that this institute will try to remedy?
Absolutely.
And how does it do that? Is it consistent with what other states do?
This is the first integrated statewide initiative of its type. It's precedent setting, much in the same way that Florida has been a real leader in creating initiatives to build a technology economy. It is, from my perspective, paradigm setting that Florida has spent billions of dollars to expand the research base, the knowledge base, and has done in about a decade what it took 3 decades to accomplish in San Diego. It's one of the things that, for me, as someone who spent the last 25 years in the commercialization of technologies, had me look at this environment and said, this is exactly where I want to be and where I think there's a great team of people to be able to work with. But the things that have been impediments here are the geographical constraints of the research. It's spread out for venture capitalists to be able to come to those locations where there's extraordinary technologies and the ability to meet with the technology transfer directors and with those startup companies can often be very challenging to get to those places across the state. So having one port of entry that could represent those opportunities in a concise way and also be able to partner those opportunities based against the specific interests of particular investors or management is exactly the kind of focus that the Institute has in being able to make a difference in accelerating that process. Does that answer your question?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're here to do. And so we have begun that process over the last 6 months. We've met with probably about 30 different CEO candidates, been able to evaluate them based on where they fall, what their particular interests are, and start to marry them with new opportunities or market them to the technology transfer offices to begin looking for opportunities that they think would be a good fit, as well as working with venture firms to start understanding more about what particular type of opportunities they'd like to invest in, and begin to pull together portfolios that we can begin to attract them to, first by looking at them, and then the next step by coming here and setting up face-to-face meetings. One of the things that's very important is where we focus and what type of impact that the Institute represents as an opportunity to the state. The 5-year plan that we've put forward based on the projections and the growth rates that have been established by the state university system metrics, which we referenced earlier, the Institute projects working with 776 potential company startups, of which we anticipate 256 companies will be formed. And of those 256 companies, we anticipate that over the 5-year period, 102 of them will receive venture capital funding. That's funding from outside the state funding that is being used to support the Institute. Those corporate startups will generate a little over 1,000 direct jobs, approximately 5,000 indirect jobs, and will leverage $735 million of venture capital funding against the estimated $10 million for the operations of the Institute over that period of time. That will generate approximately $1.8 million in total economic output. And just for reference to the salaries of those jobs, the average salary for high-tech jobs in the state of Florida is approximately $130,000. The overall salary of jobs between both the direct and indirect is about $60,000. But those all represent significantly higher average wage jobs than conventional non-technical jobs that are being put forward on a regular basis. So we really do feel that the Institute represent a resource that the state has created, that you as a consortium have created to be able to, working together, accelerate and synergistically enhance the ability to create startup companies based on the great research that's happening here in the state. So I appreciate the opportunity that you've provided for me to work within the system. The Institute is operated, just to clarify, with funding from EFI, but through a consortium represented in a grant under the University of Florida's Technology Transfer Office, led by David Day, and has been incredibly well received and supported by the various Institute partners. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. My information is also here if anyone has any questions or would like to
I'd like
follow
to
up
have,
afterwards.
do we have a copy of your presentation? It is? Okay, I did not see. That's okay. Does anybody have any questions, Governor Marshall?
In one of your early slides, you had a list of the independent institutions that participated.
Yeah.
Can you give us some idea of the extent of their participation?
Maybe that's why.
The Institute is working with all of these partners in order to represent their startup company opportunities and to marry both venture capital and entrepreneurs to these opportunities. So, for example, on this trip, which is my first trip to this part of the state, I met with FSU on Monday, and then yesterday drove to Pensacola and met with the University of West Florida around a potential opportunity, as well as the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition. And then while I'm here today, I will meet with FAMU and tomorrow with FSU. But I'm meeting with all of these partners because it is the ability to accumulate the largest scope of opportunities that's going to help us to accelerate both attraction of management that exists here in the state to new opportunities, as well as to begin mobilizing those people that have an interest in being serial management for startup companies to the state and for venture capital to have the broadest opportunities to choose from.
But I was asking about the private institutions. Are you also meeting periodically with representatives of
Scripps, for example.
Miami?
So yes, University of Miami, we are working with Nova Southeastern. For example, has just appointed a vice president of commercialization, Mark Kroll, who is at UNC, and is working now as well with Scripps here to begin their process of startups, because many of these private institutions also have a good history and a lot of resources for doing startup companies, and part of their overall commitment in receiving public funding is to generate startup companies and jobs and company creation here in Florida. So we're here to assist with that process also.
Dr. Ammons.
Mr. Keller, I want to ask you a little bit about the prioritization of investments. There have been data shown this morning, both in terms of what the legislature has done in creating centers of excellence, numbers of spin-off companies that have been developed. But when I take a look at what has happened nationally, some states have identified priorities based on the strengths in universities and colleges within those states, and have determined, for instance, that they're going to be a leader in the nation in a particular cluster. You may have read some of the cluster research that has been produced. Has that been done in the state of Florida? Have we determined that we're going to be best in class in a particular sector of research and innovation?
Well, what I can speak to is if you look at the Enterprise Florida website, there are 6 identified areas of research that are a focus for the state of Florida. And that website actually clusters the companies and resources inside of each of those technology areas. The Institute has adapted the same technology categories as we are amassing both companies to represent and technologies to build and partner around in the same way. And inside of each of those categories, and those categories are life sciences, clean tech, aerospace, new energy, and you can find that there are initiatives inside of each of those areas that have been developed by the state. For example, just in the last 2 weeks, a new clean tech report was put out by Enterprise Florida that addresses, what's happening in that industry. They put one out on a quarterly basis that it looks at the different sectors and tells you what's happening in the state, around the state, in those various technology areas. So I think that there is a state strategy around those 6 specific areas.
Have we
That's my
said,
understanding.
as a state, that we're going to be the leader in the nation in any of those sectors? And again, I'm speaking about how we are targeting the resources from the state, from the researchers themselves in terms of what they apply for and what they get. I just haven't I haven't seen yet that we are saying that we're going to be number one, or we're going to be in the top 3, top 5 nationally in these segments.
So speaking as the director of the Institute, I can speak to what we are doing as the Institute and the resources that I've observed in the time that I've been here. But when it comes to the overall state economic development strategy around technology, I would probably defer to David Day, who may have a better insight about where the state stands around that prioritization process. What would
I
you
think
say,
Dr.
Dave?
Lamont might be.
Or Ari? Sorry.
Well, that's a great question. Of course, it happens in a couple of ways. As you know, Dr. Ammons, some research areas over a period of time grow to capacity, strength, and reputation takers. When I think of FAMU, I think of environmental sciences like that as a national reputable program. I think that, sorry, I'm going to be short. I promise I will be short. Put a microphone. I feel like Frank Sinatra with this microphone.
Please don't dance.
But the other part of it, I think, is something that the board can do to identify maybe not what we're as a state going to be, but that each institution does have maybe 3, depending on the size of the institution, 3 to 5 truly horses that you want to bet on for the future. I think of photonics at UCF. I think at composite materials at FSU, and I wouldn't make that distinction. There are too many at UF. But I think that that can be done, that identification.
Governor Edwards.
Mr. Keller, when our board approved the creation of the new medical schools at FIU and at UCF to go along with the 3 that we had previously, actually the 4 counting FIU's enrollment with Miami, many of us hoped that this would give us an opportunity to become an international leader in the production of doctors and health-related industries. Is this an area, even though it's not technology directly, is this an area that your institute could be of assistance in?
I would, so just to, I want to restate your question because I didn't hear the beginning of it clearly. In regard to the integrated efforts at the University of Miami to create a medical center of excellence?
No, this is the state university system.
The state university system.
We
have 5 medical schools.
Yes.
And when we created the last 2, many of us hoped that this would give us an opportunity to become an international leader in the production of doctors and health-related technologies, as well as individuals trained. even though we're not talking specifically about a technology, we're talking more about people. Still, this is a chance that many of us hope that we could become, as Dr. Ammon suggested, not only a national leader, but an international leader in this area. Is this the type of thing that you could become involved in?
Yes, and I just wanted to address that strategy from my past. So I spent about a decade working very closely with the Illinois Medical District, most recently as the head of workforce and strategic initiatives. And that was really created 60 years ago as an integrated approach to having a medical center to respond to the needs of the city as a whole. And as a result, they have 4 major medical centers in a common area and that have grown over time. And it has, as a result, because of their cumulative efforts and their synergistic efforts, been able to accelerate what they've done and create much greater outcomes. I would say that same thing is possible here in the state as a result of having collaborative efforts and expanding the medical capacity, both from an education and from the ability to use that system to create technologies, companies, jobs, and talent to build part of the technology economy that the Institute's focused on enabling as a support to these institutions. So I think absolutely the Institute is here and serves as a resource for the commercialization part of that process. Does that answer your question?
Any more questions for Mr. Keller? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I actually do think Dr. Ammons has hit on something here, and that this is part of our frustration, I think, is that we'd like to get in a position to be able to focus on certain things, and everybody is going to have the things they do well, and we want to enhance those so that they do them they're the best at those. So I would think that as part of maybe what Mr. Day, what your group does, you could kind of focus on a discussion of that, could you not?
Yeah.
And then Governor Martin, as part of our strategic planning process, through the mission alignment discussions, we could also bring that kind of a discussion into it.
Certainly.
So, I mean, I think it's a good point he raises, and might be a better way to kind of target what we're going after. But we don't want to discourage anybody who can bring money in if it's going to be beneficial statewide and to the institution. But we can get more in certain areas and bring those things up to, the top of the heap. That'd be well worth it.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that I think the Institute represents in that regard is because it's a statewide integrated commercialization effort that reaching out for funding sources, especially at times when there are many funding sources available that are new or haven't been offered before, the Institute can provide a commercialization asset to any of the institutions because everyone is a partner in making those requests. So if there's anything that we can do in that regard as part of those requests that you may be constructing, please let me know, and whatever we can do to participate.
You'll be part of the process.
We'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Governor Martin.
Our next presenter is going to be Dr. John Hitt, University of Central Florida. And as you recall, those of us who were around a little over 2 years ago when the board approved the 2 medical schools, one of the things we were very, very concerned about was the impact of the schools on the local economy. We were very interested to see exactly what was going to be projected in terms of economic development. Dr. Hitt is going to present to us a recent presentation that he made to the Florida legislature. Dr. Hitt.
Thank you, Governor Martin. Well, good morning, and I do appreciate this opportunity to present a status report on our medical school at UCF, and let me thank you again for the support that the Board of Governors gave in allowing us to move forward with this project. I think it's one that has is already having tremendous impact on Central Florida and indeed the whole state. What I'm going to focus on this morning is the impact that the investment that the Board of Governors and the legislature have made in the medical school at UCF and what that's producing in Central Florida. I want to talk about the economic opportunity that this new medical school is creating for the future of our region. Since the approval of the medical college in 2006, the UCF College of Medicine has become the anchor for a medical city of world-class partners. Lake Nona, the site of our medical school near the Orlando International Airport, has become the hub of a life sciences cluster that will transform the entire East Orange County and profoundly affect the economy of all of Central Florida. You've got at your places, those of you who are at the table, a brochure that we did back in December that I just brought along copies of, and if you look at the back cover, you'll see in good detail what this slide on the screen shows you, and that is a general feel of the geography that we've got here. It is indeed a hub. This medical school is a hub of a life sciences cluster, and what we predicted and hoped for in 2006 has become a reality sooner than even we imagined. And we got a little bit of ribbing as we were rolling out the projections of what would happen at the time, and some good-natured, some not. But we feel like we've got a really great story to tell you that I want to just outline. Let me give you some details that I believe you'll find interesting and in these economic times very encouraging. Again, the first slide I've got up shows an aerial view of the Lake Nona site. You can see the development that's underway, the cleared land, the newly formed road beds, and the buildings that are under construction. At Lake Nona right now, there's $1 billion, that's $1 billion with a B, dollars worth of construction that's in progress. And the total investment of $2 billion has been committed. What was Pine Scrub and Sand Barrens just 2 years ago now is a teeming construction site for 5 multi-million-dollar projects. The Burnham Institute Research Facility, that's an $80 million construction budget. They will be opening this spring. A partnership between Burnham and the University of Florida, valued I suspect, sort of a ballpark value of $10 million, will bring the research expertise of the University of Florida to Lake Nona. The UCF Rene Biomedical Sciences building is nearing completion. We'll occupy it this summer. That's a $92 million construction cost. The MD Anderson Cancer Research Center affiliate in Orlando will occupy 30,000 square feet of the Biomedical Sciences building until they can construct their own building there at Lake Nona. And that's a tremendous partnership that we've had with them. The Veterans Administration decided to locate their hospital in Central Florida on the Lake Nona site. That's a $656 million construction project that is underway. The Veterans Hospital will open in 2012. The Nemours Foundation has broken ground back in February on a $400 million construction project that is underway. That will be for a children's hospital there on the site. And the medical education building for our UCF College of Medicine is moving right along. It's a $68 million construction project, and we project completion in 2010. Let me give you a brief overview of the accomplishments of the medical college. Dean Deborah German, the founding dean of our medical school, is here with us today. Deb is an innovative educator, a skilled administrator, and her accomplishments have already earned her the 2008 Business Executive of the Year Award by the Orlando Business Journal, and designation as the 2008 Central Floridian of the Year by the Orlando Sentinel. The college received LCME provisional accreditation with glowing comments, including a statement that one particular program reviewed was a national model worthy of emulation. Our 40 charter medical students who will begin their work in early August will each receive a 4-year full tuition scholarship along with a living expense allowance of $20,000 annually, and that's thanks to $7 million raised from private sources within Central Florida. We believe that this full scholarship program for an entire class is the first in the nation for a medical school. Just as a curiosity, I suppose, the UCF Medical School received 4,307 applications by the December 1 deadline, and that's for 40 slots. This is better than a 100-to-1 ratio of applicants for available place in the medical class, and I suppose by that measure we will be the most selective medical school in the country for this year, just on sheer volume of applications for available seats. The first student accepted by our medical school has a perfect score on the MedCat and a 4.0 GPA, and will graduate this spring from our own Burnett School of Biomedical Sciences. Some questioned whether the local community would welcome a new medical college. Let me tell you that more than 700 local physicians have applied and been appointed to serve as volunteer faculty members. We've got great support from the local medical community. What's unfolding at Lake Nona is a world-class example of the power of partnerships, public and private partnerships, as well as state and local partnerships. Originally, these partnerships in support of a medical school at UCF formed around two issues. The shortage of doctors in Florida, and those of you who were present for the debate about forming the two new medical schools will remember that that was in some debate. Now I think it's been finally accepted that there is indeed a current and growing shortage of doctors in our state, and the two new medical schools certainly will address that. But also there was a belief that medical schools are powerful economic engines for their region. In 2005, UCF hired the Milken Institute, an independent economic think tank, to study the economic impact of a medical school on Central Florida. Using historical data from other medical research schools around the world, Milken projected the impact on the Central Florida economy of a new medical school. But then Milken went a step further. Its report plotted the size and value of the life sciences cluster that inevitably grows around a medical research institution. Employing this methodology, the Milken Group concluded that significant economic development would result from the existence of a UCF medical school. Furthermore, that impact would be intensified by the life sciences cluster that is virtually certain to form. To just summarize their report, they estimated that the medical college itself would lead to creation of almost 6,500 jobs and with wages of $517 million, tax revenues generated $81.4 million, economic impact total $1.4 billion annually. If you look at the cluster as well, the estimate of jobs created jumps to nearly 26,000, wages $2.3 billion, tax revenues $365.2 million annually, and an annual economic impact of $6.4 billion. The potential economic impact of a medical college in Central Florida was so impressive that we asked the folks at Milken to double check their methodology and computations. They responded that they'd used a conservative estimate of Orlando's cluster potential, and they stuck by their numbers. However, economic development at Lake Nona has far surpassed what the Milken report projected just 3 years ago, as demonstrated by the construction going on right now at the site. Mindful of this new reality, we contacted the firm of Arduin, Laffer, and Moore. I'm sure a number of you know Donna Arduin. And we asked them to do a follow-up study, which we received in December. And let me share with you some very impressive projections that came from it. Now, we're going to be stepping through several slides here. When you look at these graphs, the center graph is always going to be the Milken projection from 2 years ago of where we would be in the year 2017. And what's going to be on the left will be Donna Arguin's projection of where we are with what is firmly committed today. And then the far right will be her updated projection for 2017. So the far left shows where we would be in 2017 if we got no further commitments for the Lake Nona site than we have today. The VA hospital, Burnham, University of Florida building, etc., would produce 16,220 jobs with no further development. The original estimate, of course, had been that a cluster would form and we'd have almost 26,000 jobs. That's been updated to 30,260 jobs in 2017. If we look at the economic impact in terms of Florida wages, the original estimate was $2.3 billion, as you can see, the estimate for what is already firmly committed today is $1.5 billion, but the 2017 projection with further development as forecast would be increased to $2.8 billion. If we look at tax revenues that are projected, originally 365.2 was projected annually by 2017. Donna Arguin says that if we don't get any more new development than we've got committed now, it would be at $246.5 million. She thinks in 2017 it will really be $459 million. Economic impact. This is an ROI measure that looks at the return is economic activity. So if you look at how much economic activity is produced for each dollar that is invested from the state, the original estimate had been $10.80 per. We would say if we get no more than what we've got today, it would be $9.20, but we fully expect in 2017 a number of $13.50. If you look then at where we are on total economic impact, originally we really had people who were skeptical of our $6.4 billion annual economic impact estimate by 2017. But as you can see, the far left column here, if we got nothing more than we have committed today, we would be at $5.2 billion. So we're 80% of the way toward the estimate of $6.4 billion in 2 years. And we fully expect that the impact will be $7.6 billion when the full cluster forms around it. This is a very meaningful graph for those of us who lobbied hard for these medical schools. The real question is, what do they do for the economy? What do they do for the state? Well, just in terms of tax revenues, government revenues, you can see that in 2010, the estimate from Donna Arguin is that more tax revenues, government revenues, will be created than expended. If you look, and it's important you understand, this is not just our medical school. This is the amount of money the government spent on the Burnham Institute as well as the UCF Medical. So a substantial investment in the Burnham Institute facilities at Lake Nona is reflected in these numbers. But in 2010, the curves crossed, and we're into positive territory annually on tax revenues generated as opposed to state funds expended. Quick summary, the cost is whatever, it is $538 million over the life of the project. Number of jobs created, we're projecting 30,000 now as opposed to the original 26,000. wages. You've seen already tax revenues we've just reviewed. The ROI, as it is measured in projects like this, economic activity per dollar invested is very favorable. And the total economic impact, I think, is just outstanding. Again, we took a lot of ribbing about a $6.4 billion annual estimate when we first got going in this. Now we see that after just a couple of years, we're 80% of the way toward there, and we expect to be at $7.6 billion annually by 2017. I think at a time of declining economic activity around the globe, these figures are indeed remarkable. In just 2 years, again, we're at 80% of the 10-year economic impact forecast. So here's our message. We think that the new medical schools, I would include Mitch Medic at Florida International, I'm sure can share with you some equally great numbers. They get there a different way. They're not doing a new medical city at a remote site as we are. They're on their campus. But there's really nothing that's going to have a better impact on the Florida economy than these new medical schools. So, Governor Edwards, when you raised your question a little while ago about the impact of the medical colleges, I was eager to get up here and tell you something about it. I think it's a great story we've got to tell. I don't think there's any better investment that our state could make right now than these medical schools. I think they certainly will help produce the physicians that we need in our state, but in terms of an economic impact, it is hard to imagine something that would be a lot stronger than that. Now, we need to support the existing medical schools as well. There's no question about that. They've got needs, and we certainly acknowledge that. But we're at a crucial point now with the 2 new medical schools where we must maintain the investment track that was promised to LCME. And I appreciate the support that the Board of Governors has given us this year in seeking the funding that we need to stay on track to get these medical colleges open and fully accredited. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some good news with you this morning.
It's good news.
Doctor, the question, if we had decided not to approve the medical schools, and the legislature decided not to approve the medical schools, would any of this economic development would have occurred in the Lake Nona area?
Oh, I don't know about Lake Nona. Some of these things would have occurred. The Nemours Foundation was hoping to build a hospital, but they turned the corner on gaining the support they needed for its approval when they announced they would locate with us at Lake Nona. The Veterans Hospital had been talked about for decades. They got a lot of support when they said they were coming to Lake Nona to partner with our medical college. So I think some of it undoubtedly would have occurred. I don't think you would have the critical mass you need for the formation of a significant life sciences cluster that you get by having a medical school as the anchor tenant of a new medical city at Lake Nona. I just don't believe that would have happened. So some of it, yes. This magnitude, I just would be very skeptical. And critically, Governor Martin, if you ask John Reed, the CEO of Burnham, he would tell you that he would not have located in Orlando had it not been for the UCF Medical School thing. So the other key component, the medical school and the Burnham, are really the anchor tenants of that whole medical city. You wouldn't have the Burnham Institute there without. And that's because as they go to recruit top medical talent, they want appointments in a medical college. And Dean German is able to work hand in glove with Dan Kelly, the local CEO for Burnham, to help him recruit the talented men and women they need to staff their research institute.
Thank you, Dr. Hitt. That is a very impressive story.
Thank you.
As we knew it would be.
I think that's a very important message that we need to continue to reinforce as we begin to tell the story, the economic impact of both schools in having on the state. Dr. Medic, you have any comments you'd like to share?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to underscore something that President Hitt said. we have done completely independent. As a matter of fact, we wanted to ensure, I think we talked about this early on, that each of us had different organizations doing economic development studies rather than, oh, well, they're all, this is the one answer. And the remarkable thing is that, as President Hitt pointed out, we are in a different context and are getting there through different routes that, give or take $1 billion, okay, you're talking about these numbers, give or take $1 billion, our economic development study has very, very similar results. In our case, there is a huge established medical infrastructure in Miami, so that if you move that infrastructure forward just a little bit, by having the interplay of two medical schools in the same, city, you get tremendous, economic impact. Additionally, what we're finding is very similar to what President Hitt mentioned. For instance, I can't give you the name because I don't want to, impact the deal adversely, but we do about $110 million of research, and we have gotten there after 37 years of being in business. We are now talking to a group that does $27 million of medically related research. They want to come to FIU. They would have no interest in FIU if it hadn't been for the medical school. Same people, we have researchers that do some work, not in the medical school, that were the initial hook to get them interested. But with no medical school, no group. Of that $27 million, 1/3 is overhead. So we would have $9 million of very, very much needed overhead to improve our laboratories, to pay faculty salaries, staff, that would come with them. We expect that there'll be an announcement in about a week. That would not, have been possible. But our numbers are 2025. It's a little different. We also have a unique element in our medical school in which we are adopting some central city areas, so some medically underserved areas. And our public health people, our medical students, our nurses, our social workers are all going to work with those areas, and we believe that there will be a significant savings to the state, and there'll be a significant medical impact to the state, by doing that. So the strategies are somewhat different. We've located on campus to maximize the interface with the medical school and the rest of the campus. We have a 30-acre site that, I didn't plan to make a presentation today, but there will be enormous investment in that site over the years. So what we have found, we do stay in touch, and our two deans, John and I, talk frequently, but we're getting to a similar place using different paths. And also, you had talked about #1 in the world. If we do get this group, we will, with the strengths that we have and the group, be #1 in the world in this very narrow area, specialized area, which I can tell you about later because I don't want to preempt the announcement.
So we'll have the notice in a week, right? So a week?
A couple of weeks.
Governor Stavros.
Well, obviously, the decision with two new medical schools has been the right decision. Very impressive figures. I'm sure that University of Florida would have outstanding figures in what they've done through the years. I know that in Tampa Bay, not only University of South Florida Medical School, but the Moffitt Cancer Center, the VA Hospital, All Children's Hospital, all part. This is an outstanding thing for the state of Florida in medical experience, medical inventions, and I'm very proud of what they're doing. And to achieve what you've done in such 2 short years, President Hitt, is that what it's been? 80%? And I'm sure President
Same time.
That's very, very impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. We are going to have to move very rapidly through the rest of this agenda and be finished by 12:15. But I did want to mention that we are going to have a piece on medical education this afternoon when we come back in the strategic planning, and I would like to hear a little bit from the established medical schools during that period of time, because they do have experience, but unfortunately neither one of them are here at the moment. But Bernie will be talking about funding, and then after that, if we have a minute, I'd like to get back to this topic and kind of get a broader view. We have the dean here from FAU in their partnership with Miami, so he will be in a position to comment on that as well. So thank you very much. Our next presenter is going to be Dr. Dan Rene from Regeneration Technologies, a UCF incubator success story. And I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to push it a little.
I was planning to be briefed from the beginning, so.
All right, good.
Should be okay.
Good, but we want to hear the important stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. As we all know, an individual's desire and underlying skill in science and engineering often is cultivated at the elementary school level. And whether it's through the initiatives of an individual science teacher or a nationwide initiative like First Robotics, the seeds of innovation are often planted at a young age. However, it is my opinion that our university system plays the most key role in the conversion of these talents in science and engineering into a positive economic impact for our state. My name is Dan Rene, and I'm the founder and president of Regeneration Technologies. I started the company in May of 2000 after receiving a PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Central Florida. In the same month, my company was accepted into UCF's Technology Incubator Program. So after graduation, I moved from my student office on campus to my new corporate office within the incubator building. The company was initially funded by a small business innovative research contract from the Department of Defense. This federal program enabled my company to hit the ground running the day after I graduated with a $100,000 research and development contract from the Missile Defense Agency. 6 months later, the initial research was a success, and a $900,000 follow-on contract was awarded. One component of this research was a partnership with UCF, enabling Regeneration Technologies to collaborate with UCF professors and graduate students. This UCF research work was enabled by a matching funds grant from the Florida High-Tech Corridor. Rene dollars were matched with Florida High-Tech Corridor dollars that went to UCF to supplement and accelerate our research endeavors. This research also was a success, and as a result of the collaboration, many of the graduate students at UCF on those projects joined Regeneration Technologies as full-time engineers after their graduations, earning on average $70,000 per year while working on exciting projects that they can help shape and guide. In the past 8 years, Regeneration Technologies has competitively won over 30 contracts from the Department of Defense for a total influx of capital into the state of $15 million. We have subcontracted $1.2 million back to UCF in the form of research contracts. We've received 5 patents with an additional 5 pending, have licensed 1 patent from the university, and now regularly pay both dividends and royalties back to UCF. Our first high volume product will go into production in the next year, with expected sales to the U.S. military alone of $30 million per year. This endeavor stemmed from one student's idea being cultivated in the support system of UCF's Technology Incubator. With thousands of Florida students studying in the fields of science and engineering, the prospect of even greater success is excellent. This is why I believe that the initiatives of university technology incubation, statewide economic gardening with a SBR matching funds program, and local small business economic development are critical to our state's prosperity. And I'd be happy to answer any questions more specifically about how my company grew out of UCF Technology Incubator.
How many employees do you now have?
Right now, the company is still in the research and development phase, so we have about a staff of 20 that are all at a minimum bachelor's degree in engineering, if not master's. The real headcount growth is probably going to be over this next year as we ramp up production of our first product. So,
are your products all top secret?
No.
So what are you making?
The first one that's going to go into production is actually a miniature water bottle size refrigeration system, miniature air conditioner essentially, battery operated to cool soldiers' bodies when they have to wear body armor or chem bio suits, all those protective suits they wear. And unfortunately, they're working or fighting in hot environments all the time. So it's a little miniature personal cooling system that can really extend their capabilities. And that's what's going into production, is going to get fielded in both the Army and the Navy, hopefully in the next couple of years.
Great. Does anybody have questions for Dr. Rene?
Governor Roberts. I think this is an example of our
of our great university system, and you see a young man standing up there successful, we need to send him over to the Hill to talk, to show our value. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good example of what we want. Governor Martin, back to you.
Okay, our next presenter is going to be Dr. Ben Wang. He is the director of the USS Center of Excellence in Composite Materials at Florida State University. Dr. Wang has been very successful in moving from a concept to a National Science Foundation recognition, the Center of Excellence status, which is now housed at the Florida State University's latest research building, devoted entirely to his center. Dr. Wang.
Well, thank you, Governor Martin. Good morning. My name is Ben Wang, and I'll be the last presentation this morning. With me today is one of our graduate students, Jesse. Could you please stand up? Okay. Dr. Lamont asked me to bring a graduate student with me in case I'm not able to answer some of the questions. He can help me. We are very pleased and honored, to be here today. And this is a short presentation, and I have 4 more slides to share with you about what we do, why it is important, and who our customers and partners are, and where we are going. And our research is advanced composites, very lightweight, high-strength composite materials. If you look at the bottom of the slides, and these are only a few of the examples that advanced composites, can be applied to. For instance, the next generation commercial jets, high-speed bullet trains, and the performance cars, boat yards, sporting goods, and the critical infrastructures. And in total, composites represents a $110 billion business a year.
Did you bring any Bucky paper with you?
I was going to ask, yes. Did you bring Bucky paper with you?
No, I forgot today. But we just moved into a brand new building, 45,000 square foot building, and we'll be delighted, to offer a tour anytime that if you have 30 minutes, and we have 55 students working in that area, and I'm pretty sure they will be delighted and honored to speak with you about their Bucky papers. In fact, Jesse is one of the team leaders, working on Bucky papers. So these are the very lightweight, high-strength composites. Compared to aluminum or titanium, they are at least 35% lighter. So we can make very fuel efficient vehicles, land, sea, and air vehicles, which means that they burn less fossil fuels. Just because they are light doesn't mean we compromise the safety. In fact, if you compare a composite bumper to an aluminum bumper, a composite bumper can withstand 4 times more impact energy, than an aluminum bumper. And also, over the entire life cycle, composites, for instance, composite bridges are much cheaper, than concrete bridges. This slide shows that Florida is a major leader, in this advanced composites arena. And let's just look at a few industries. The first one is the boat building industry. Florida is the largest boat building state in the country. It employs about 100,000 people, and it generates about $18.5 billion of economic impact. And Florida is the 3rd largest state, in the aerospace industry, about 25,000 jobs. And all major defense contractors, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, they all have substantial operations in the state of Florida. And last but not the least is the space industry. Florida has always been regarded as the cornerstone state okay, in the space technology. This slide shows our customers, sponsors, and partners. Okay, we work with almost all the major players in the supply chain of advanced composites, from the raw material suppliers all the way to the system integrators like Lockheed and Boeing and Siemens. Okay. And we also work with the economic development organizations and trying to create new businesses. And this is my last slide, okay, to show this area shows where the traditional university is, okay, and most university professors focus on fundamental and applied research and frontier research and to produce high quality students. And this is where the marketplace is, okay, so typically there's a gap there, and what we're trying to do is to turn innovations and inventions into products and jobs, especially in our state. And that is why the Center of Excellence in Advanced Composite was funded in year 2007. So I would like to close this discussion by trying to summarize in business terms. Okay. Since the creation of the Center of Excellence in Advanced Composites about 2 years ago, and we began to gain traction in commercialization and tech transfer. Just two quick examples. There's a company called the Georgia Aerospace, and the owner of the company is called Dr. Tom Menza. 2 years ago, he sought us out. He visited different universities, research centers, including the best one at the University of Delaware. Okay. So he signed a teaming agreement with us, and last year he funded us a major project. This year, about $500,000. Last week he was here, last Wednesday, he was here for a program review, and he saw the tremendous commercialization potential, and he decided to establish a production facility in Tallahassee, Florida. The following day, he incorporated a company called the Green Technology Systems, Inc., okay, in Tallahassee, and he has been in discussion with the EDC staff and looking at different spaces close to the airport or Hamilton Park and trying to establish the first production facilities to apply lightweight advanced composites to vehicles, the green vehicles. So this is one example. And the other one is there's a company called the Rossiter Nanocomposites in the UK, and they would like to establish a first production facility in the US. Okay, and most likely they will start their factory in St. Petersburg because of their work with St. P. College and also with us. Okay, so we're trying to apply advanced composites to implants and also prosthetics. So those are the two examples. So in summary, that is, I believe university research does help state economy and the job market. Okay, thank you very much.
How many jobs will that factory, production facility have, do you know?
I spoke to Tom just yesterday because he sent me a copy of the certificate of the new company, and that's the first question I asked him, is how many jobs? He said initially he's going to start in a few weeks about 30 jobs, okay, and then ramp it up perhaps in 2 or 3 years to about 200, 300.
That's fabulous. Does anybody have questions for Dr. Wang?
Yes, I'm sorry, what university was this at?
Florida State.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing else? Well, where's the Bucky paper come in?
Well, this I think we have 30 seconds.
Is that
left
just
or
a
so.
trade name for one of these?
Bucky paper actually is a generic name. Okay. The person who coined the terminology is Dr. Richard Smalley, who is a 1996 Nobel laureate. And one day he gave a small Bucky paper about the size of a quarter to Dr. Les Kramer and me, and he said, you think you can infiltrate this Bucky paper with epoxy resin to make super strong composites? And we tried it, and it was very successful. We were delighted, so the students began to study how we can scale it up. because a bucket paper of this size is really not very useful outside the lab. Now, Jesse and his friends can make a bucket papers as big as 12 inches by 24 inches, and they're working on a process by which they can produce bucket papers continuously.
And is it being used commercially now?
It's been tested. Okay, last year alone, we provided about 350 square feet of bucket paper to Lockheed for some applications yet to be identified. I believe it's a very much defense-related application.
Okay, well, let us know whenever it's okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We can keep a secret.
It's just that camera you got to work. Jesse, have you got anything to say? Was he correct? Was he accurate? All right, any more comments from the board or anybody else? Okay, we're going to finish up here with ExpertNet. Going to have a brief presentation from Ms. Becky Augustiniak. I read my notes.
Well, now it's afternoon, so good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm here to talk about ExpertNet, Florida ExpertNet, and ExpertNet promotes economic development by connecting business, industry, government, and communities with university expertise. I hope at the end of this presentation you see ExpertNet as an important tool in driving Florida's economic future. Florida ExpertNet is a gateway to expertise and intellectual capital. Its primary purpose is to assist business, industry, and government to identify in one central place expertise and resources across Florida's universities. It provides a knowledge base of applied research information from all of the universities to form a unified system. Here are some of the benefits. It showcases leading-edge research capabilities. It encourages collaboration among universities, government, and industry, and it promotes the availability of licensing opportunities available for commercialization. A similar system is Expertise Ireland, which is nearly identical to ExpertNet. Expertise Ireland has been referred to as the most advanced online portal of its kind in Europe. Many countries have decided that expertise portals are an important strategy in economic development. ExpertNet is bought and paid for and has been updated recently to focus on economic development. We can see by the stats that new content is being added and that usage is significant. The 4,700 visitors to the site span 97 countries and territories, with the U.S., the UK, and India being the top three. What specifically is ExpertNet? We know that it is a gateway to expertise and opportunities. But what's important is what's behind the gate. The framework of the portal consists of the following key features: leading-edge research, news, experts, funded projects, centers and institutes, technology licensing opportunities, and a speakers bureau. Here's the home page. You can see some of the key features, such as leading-edge research, news, and links to each university's sponsored research office. The menu provides links to the other key features. One of the most important functions of the site is the all-in-one search at the upper right-hand side of the page. The function allows you to enter a keyword or a phrase and then execute a search across all the databases. Search results may yield relevant experts, projects, funded projects, centers, licensing opportunities, and speakers. Now let's go to biotechnology under leading edge research. This page showcases primary resources in the biotech field available from universities as well as other key organizations in Florida. This is just a partial view. Here's the experts section, which showcases experts in quick stats and provides links to experts within each university. Advanced search tools are also provided so that you can find that needle in the haystack. Funded projects is a directory of funded research spanning more than 2 decades. The same set of search tools is provided for you to browse, search, and find funded projects across universities. There are approximately 7,000 experts and 70,000 projects. Here's the Centers and Institutes section. There are over 500 SUS Centers and Institutes. Each of the centers is required to report annually to the Board of Governors using the Centers and Institutes online reporting system. This system is directly integrated into ExpertNet, reducing redundancy and duplication of effort. Let's look at how you would find a center using the keyword energy. So the search results yield a list of all of those centers and institutes using that keyword. And then if we select the Clean Energy Research Center, what we'll get is a profile of that center with contact information and their mission and other information. This section provides a one-stop shop for identifying university-based technology licensing opportunities. Records contain core intellectual property and, if available, information related to associated patents. An email alert service is available that will notify subscribers when a new licensing opportunity meets their criteria. ExpertNet provides a tool for each university, if desired, to manage its licensing opportunity data. This is useful especially for smaller universities. The Speakers Bureau is a directory of expert speakers and their presentations covering a wide variety of topics available to businesses and organizations for a fee or at no charge. At the top of the page is a link to a new tool, very top, right-hand corner, My ExpertNet. So if you click on My ExpertNet, you'll get a login screen. You'll log in and then you'll gain access to personalized My ExpertNet page, allowing you to manage your information within each section. So if you click on the ExpertNet profile, and again, what we were talking about before is what's available to the public. This is, again, a part of the side of the system that's for the experts to provide us with more information about their expertise, to populate the system. So this form, we selected profile, and then this form allows the expert to view, add, and edit their information. And what we've done is we provide the baseline data from your sponsored research office and additional areas of information to describe your expertise, for example, honors, degrees, awards, research terms, etc. Okay, so as a way of trying to be proactive and not just depend on people coming to the ExpertNet site, we've developed a service called Powered by ExpertNet. So it's a service that can customize and push data to other websites. We've already talked about the Centers and Institutes online reporting system. We're currently trying to partner with FICPR, Florida Institute for the Commercialization of Public Research, and are proposing a partnership with University Community Engagement. I have 2 concepts to show you quickly for pushing information to other organizational websites. Using a state agency as a model, this is an illustration of pushing customized data to an outside website from ExpertNet. So by embedding ExpertNet search tools, users can enter keywords, choose from a relevant list of descriptors to quickly identify university-based resources and expertise. So we're using the agricultural, state agency website. They can select, do a search, and then they're going to get a list of the relevant centers and institutes, experts, funded projects, speakers, and licensing opportunities. Another example is the Florida Renewable Energy Association. So we've gone from a state agency, now we're dealing with a nonprofit. Again, the users can search by keyword or by control terms. The example here is searching for solar energy, and so what they get is a list again of all of those sources of expertise within the university system that could provide expertise and hopefully help them with their problems. So how is that?
Good.
Quick. Yes.
Governor Duncan.
I've been following this for several years, and I've seen several presentations. I think it's great where you're going. I guess I'm still semi-troubled by the fact that it seems we have somewhat sporadic and/or inconsistent participation across the system. I know we don't have time for it right now, and I don't think it is, but I still think that I don't understand why people aren't participating unless there's some other challenge to it or not. But what I'd like to ask, Madam Chair, is if maybe we could have the VPs of research have a call. I'd just like to hear back their collective opinion on whether this should be kind of a mandatory participation so that we really do get the volume going, or if there's a compelling reason why it shouldn't be. I'm kind of struggling because it seems like there's still this, even though you've made improvements and challenges, it just still doesn't seem like it's getting the full buy-in across the system.
Well, and adding on to that, it seems to me like it has a role with this Institute for Commercialization somehow that ought to be captured. So it's fine with me if RE, I don't know if that's the proper group, but whatever group it is, let's get that going because I think it's important. Governor Solano.
Since I'm relatively new to the board, how is this effort being funded?
I think it's at FSU. Larry, what's the deal with this? Is this part of you?
Annual baseline appropriation is my understanding.
There was one. I don't know if it's still there.
Is it still there as a line item at FSU?
As far as I know, it is, yes.
But how did that come to be? I mean, it sounds like an independent thing.
About, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, there was an effort through the board to coordinate a number of activities across the state, and there was some funding for that, and this was one of the projects.
And you just are housing it or something administratively? Got it. Okay, anybody have any further comments? Any further comments about the program? Well, I for one thought it was pretty informative, and I hope that we can do more of this as time goes on, and maybe this afternoon we can get a little bit more into the medical schools and the more established ones, economic development. We passed around a sheet looks like this. Didn't these move?
Yeah.
We didn't get it.
Yeah. Oh, Stan, they stopped at Stan or something. One. Did we have any extra ones over on this end? Anyway, these are to stop at AJ, okay? This is what, Janet Owen, are you in here?
Maybe already gone.
Oh, she was just there. Anyway, these are some of the things that are available for us to do this afternoon, and because we really don't have that large of a group, we could probably actually do all of them together if we'd like to do that, or we could divide up. So take a look at this while we eat our lunch. We're just going to grab a quick lunch in the next room. Unfortunately, I don't want to seem rude, but it's just for the board members and the presidents to pick up some lunch because we couldn't coordinate in this facility for a very large group. So yes.
We're returning here.
Yes, we will start back. We'll talk about this in the next room, but there will be buses that will take us over to the Capitol at 1:30, is that right?
I think so.
And then we will return here, we will leave the Capitol to return here.
We would need it closer to 1:15.
I'm sorry, 1:15. And we will return here on buses that leave the Capitol at 3:30, so that we will be able to start our meetings at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I'll tell her. Yeah, we're going to do it in the order that was originally published.
Okay.
Yeah. That's sunshine.
Oh, for God's sake.